I have solved hundreds of SAT boundary or punctuation questions, and I have noticed patterns that help my students boost their reading and writing scores by 50 to 100 plus points. Today, I'm going to share those rules with you, along with multiple examples, so you know exactly how to identify sentence types, what to do when you see them, and how to spot the correct answer almost every single time. So just log in for these 25 or so minutes, and by the end of the video, you will have at least boosted your score. The first concept you need to know about is the independent boundary rule. Here's the first example. The Mission 66 initiative, which was approved by Congress in 1956, represented a major investment in the infrastructure of overburdened national parks. Okay, so did this make sense on its own? Yes, it did. When a sentence makes sense on its own, then it is independent. Sometimes you're unsure whether a sentence made sense or not, so how can you know if it is independent or not? Well, what makes a line independent is a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. If you have those things, then the line is independent. So, where's the subject and verb in the line we read? The subject is the Mission 66 initiative, and the verb is represented. So, in the line after the blank, the subject is the Mission 66 initiative, and the verb is represented. Great. Now, let's read the line after the blank. It prioritized physical improvements to the parks, roads, utilities, employee housing, and visitor facilities while also establishing educational programming for the public. Okay, where is the subject and verb in this line after the blank? Well, the subject is it. Yes, it can also be considered as a subject. And the verb is prioritized. So in the line after the blank, the subject is it and the verb is prioritized. So now, since both the lines before and after the blank have a subject and a verb and make sense alone, then the question is in the independent format. When both sides are independent or when it is in the independent format, you have three punctuation options: word plus period, word plus semicolon, word plus comma plus fanboys. Fanboys are for and nor but or yet so. So you could write parks period or parks semicolon or parks comma and. And over here we have parks semicolon, so you'll pick that choice. So choice C. Okay, what about this next one? After the United Kingdom began rolling out taxes equivalent to a few cents on single-use plastic grocery bags in 2011, plastic bag consumption decreased by up to 90%. So does this make sense on its own? Yes, it does. So it is independent. What about the line after the blank? Such taxes are subject to what economists call the rebound effect. So again, does this make sense on its own? Yes, it does. Okay, so since both the lines before and after the blank make sense on their own, then the question is in the independent format. And we have three options to choose from: percent period such, percent semicolon such, percent comma and such. In this case, we can see that choice C is correct because it uses a period. Now, moving on to the last independent question. Let's read it. Typically, underlines, scribbles, and notes left in the margins by a former owner lower a book's value. This makes sense on its own, of course. What about the line after the blank? When the former owner is a famous poet like Walt Whitman, such markings known as marginella can be a goldmine to literary scholars. This also makes sense on its own, so it is in the independent format, meaning that we have three options to choose from: value, period, or value, semicolon, or value, comma, but. I chose but because that's the fanboy offered in the choices. Okay, so which choice matches one of our three options? Choice A, so it is the correct answer. Now, this next question is a little different because it is not in the independent format. It is in the independent dependent format. There are a couple of things that make a clause dependent. So, if it has no subject, or it does not have a verb, or it just does not make sense on its own, and it feels like there should be something before or after it, then the clause is dependent. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. From afar, African American fiber artist Bisa Butler's portraits look like paintings. Their depictions of human faces, bodies, and clothing so intricate that it seems only a fine brush could have rendered them. When viewed up close, however, the portraits reveal themselves to be quilts. Okay, so we will just focus on the line before the blank, so this part. When viewed up close, however, the portraits reveal themselves to be quilts. Did that make sense on its own? Yes. What about the line after the blank? The stitching barely visible among the thousands of pieces of printed microcut fabric. To me, this line kind of felt off, so let me try to find the subject and verb. So here's the subject, which is the stitching. However, I don't see the verb. So in the line after the blank, there is a subject but no verb, so it is incomplete, meaning it is dependent. Since the question is in the independent dependent format, we cannot use the three punctuation options. So basically, we cannot say quilts period the, quilts semicolon the, quilts comma and the. For this question, the only option really left is choice B, so we'll go ahead and proceed with that. However, the choices won't always be this direct. There will sometimes be dashes, colons, and more that can confuse you. Therefore, I'm going to be sharing with you lots of other bonus tips and tricks that include exactly when to use semicolons, dashes, colons, and more. Before the 2025 SAT, if you saw both a period and a semicolon in the answer choices, you could eliminate both of them because they did the same job. So, for example, with this example here, you could have just canceled out choice C and choice D instantly when you saw one of them had a semicolon and the other had a period, and they were both positioned the same way. That's no longer true, however. Semicolons now have two roles. The first one is to separate two independent clauses, and the second is to separate items in a complex series. The first role we have discussed, which is to separate two independent sentences. So let me show you the second role where semicolons separate items in a complex series. As the 14th U.S. Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden has many responsibilities. These include overseeing the Library of Congress's collection, which boasts more than 162 million items. Okay, that made sense on its own, so it is independent. The U.S. Copyright Office, which registers copyright claims and advises Congress on copyright law, and appointing the U.S. Poet Laureate. Okay, this looks and sounds kinda weird. This is exactly how a complex series looks like on the SAT. It is some sort of list and there are multiple semicolons and commas. The way I usually recognize it before even solving it is after the blank by like a line or so, I see a semicolon and the word and immediately after it. That's how I sometimes identify complex series questions by seeing the weird format and by seeing the semicolon plus and after the blank by a line. I have broken these complex series questions down into a simple structure that you can memorize or take note of. Sentence, semicolon, something, comma, explanation or example of that something, semicolon, and. Okay, that is very confusing. I know, but just stick with me for a second. So in this case, there is first a sentence. So it says, these include overseeing the Library of Congress's collections, which boast more than 162 million items. Then there is supposed to be a semicolon. So yes, the correct choice is the one with the semicolon, but I'll just continue with this example. Then there is supposed to be something and a comma immediately after it. So here it says the US Copyright Office, comma. So that is the something and the comma after it. Then there is supposed to be an explanation or an example on that thing after it. So in here it explains what the US Copyright Office does. And lastly, there is a semicolon and the word and immediately after it. So that is basically how these complex series questions work. You can instantly pick the choice with the semicolon when you notice that it is a complex series question. However, you will see why I explained its entire structure soon. By the way, we said the choice with the semicolon is correct, meaning choice C, but if you look at choice D, there is a period. According to the old rule, this should not be possible because the semicolon and period would have cancelled each other out. Now, let's move on to the next complex series question. Using natural debris, such as dried leaves, man made trash, such as plastic bags, and more traditional art supplies, such as tree glue, Ghanaian artist Ed Franklin Gavua creates his striking Yikakai African masks. So I'm just gonna read until here. But as you saw, it looked and sounded pretty weird. And there was a semicolon plus the word and a little after the blank, which means the correct choice is the one with the semicolon. However, we can see choice B and choice D both have a semicolon. So how do we know which one to pick? Well, as we said, there is first the sentence. So using natural debris such as dried leaves, okay. Then there's supposed to be a semicolon. So a semicolon after the leaves part, okay? Then after that, something, comma, then an example. In this case, it says man-made trash, comma, such as plastic bags. This means choice B is correct. Next up is type names. So what do I mean by type names? Whenever there's a type, usually a job, then a name, so a name of the person that does that job, or the name of the thing that is an example of that type, you will select the choice without any punctuation. Let me show you what I mean. And here I can see it says entomologist Heather Grapp. Entomologist is a job or type, and Heather Grapp is the name of the person doing that job. So for these ones, we will select the choice without any punctuation, so choice C. What about this next question? Try to solve it on your own. All right. I see that it says researchers and then the name of the researchers. So this is a type name question, meaning I'll pick the choice without any punctuation, so choice C. What about this one? Try to solve it on your own. Again, it says compound, which is a type, and aluminum oxide is an example of that type. It is an example of the compound. So, which choice will we pick? Choice D. Why? Because it does not have any punctuation. What about this last one? We can see it says American geologist Mary Tharp. So, we will choose the option without any punctuation. Even though there is a comma after the name in the text, we will not pay much attention to that because we always need to pick the choice without punctuation. Now let's move on to dashes. Whenever you see a dash in the multiple choices, then immediately check for any dashes in the text. In total, so including the part in the blank, the text should include 0 or 2 dashes. It cannot consist of 1 or 3 dashes. So in this first question, I see that there is only one dash, which is grammatically incorrect, and I see in the choices there's another dash. So if I select that choice, that would mean there will be 2 dashes in total, which is grammatically correct. Therefore, choice C is correct. What about this next question? Pause the video and try to solve it. So you can see that there's a dash in the choices, however, there is no dashes in the text. So if we pick option C with a dash, in total we would have one dash, which is grammatically incorrect. So let's read the text to see which choice is correct. Between 322 and 184 BCE, the Maurya Empire established a complex economic system that, through trade and centralized taxation, funded major infrastructure projects throughout the Indian subcontinent. Okay, you might have noticed that within the blank there is a relative clause. A relative clause is basically noun or a noun phrase plus comma plus extra information or non-essential information plus comma again plus the continuation or the rest of the sentence. So in this case, this part over here that says through trade and centralized taxation is basically the extra information talking about the complex economic system. So if we cut off the extra information and read it again, we would say between 322 and 184 BCE, the Maurya Empire established a complex economic system that funded major infrastructure projects throughout the Indian subcontinent. As you just saw, it still made sense. That's how relative clauses work, and we now know that the correct choice is the one with the comma, so choice B. By the way, I just wanted to mention that you can join my free community with over 300 plus members where we have multiple classes and free resources to help you boost your SAT reading and writing score. You can ask me or the members in the community any questions you have. Click the link below to join now. Okay, take a look at this one. However, it is a little different. Pause the video and try to solve it. So, the first thing that caught my attention was that the choices were much longer and there is more than one choice that has a dash. Okay, what about the text? The text also has one dash and there is supposed to be 2 dashes. This means that we are supposed to select the choice with the dash. However, two of these choices have a dash, so what do we do? Well, I explained to you what you should do if you see these dash questions, but I never really explained what dashes actually do. Dashes actually act very similarly to relative clauses because if we remove the line in between the dashes and we try to read it again, it would still make sense. Because the line in the middle is extra or non essential information about the noun or noun phrase mentioned before the first dash. So I can now know which choice to pick by understanding which part is the non-essential information. So in here it says, in 1986, conceptual artist Sophie Kell asked 23 people, all of whom had been born without sight, to describe their image of beauty in which detail. Kell paired excerpts of these conversations with photographs, both of interviewees and the items they described, from hair to grass to sculptures to powerful effect in her exhibition The Blind. Okay, so let's read this part again. Kale paired excerpts of these conversations with photographs. Okay, so in between the dashes, it is supposed to give additional or extra information on excerpts of these conversations with photographs. Excerpts, by the way, mean clips or scenes. So you have two choices. The extra information in choice B says both of interviewees and the items they described, from hair to grass to sculptures, while the extra information in choice C says both of interviewees and the items they described. We can see that from hair to grass to sculptures is a part of the extra information on the excerpts or clips of these conversations with photographs, meaning that choice B is correct. You can even try to read the sentence without the non essential or extra information. So, for choice B, I would read it like Kel paired excerpts of these conversations with photographs to powerful effect in her exhibition The Blind. This sounds right. What about choice C? Kelp heard excerpts of these conversations with photographs from hair to grass sculptures to powerful effect in her exhibition The Blind. To me, it doesn't sound right. But since this is a max difficulty question, some students might think that this sounds right. However, again, the part that says from hair to sculptures is non essential. So choice B is correct. Here's another question. Pause the video and try to solve it. Eli Eisenberg, a genetics expert at Tel Aviv University in Israel, recently discovered that cephalopods, ocean dwellers that include the squid, the octopus, and the cuttlefish, have a special genetic ability called RNA editing that confers evolutionary advantages. First things first, I noticed that there's extra or non essential information trying to explain cephalopods. So you could use dashes or a relative clause. However, in here we already have a relative clause, and we cannot have more than one relative clause in a sentence. So we are supposed to use dashes. Therefore, we will cancel choice A and C because they both use relative clauses and commas. And choice C even uses a weirdly placed colon. So, of course, we are left with choice B and choice D because they both use dashes. Choice B says cephalopods, ocean dwellers that include the squid, the octopus, and the cuttlefish. This means that ocean dwellers describe cephalopods, and this part over here is important information. It is not extra information about cephalopods. However, we can see that this is wrong. Because ocean dwellers that include the squid, the octopus, and the cuttlefish is a description or extra information on cephalopods and is not necessary for the sentence to make sense. Choice D considers ocean dwellers that include the squid, the octopus, and the cuttlefish to be a description or extra information on cephalopods. Therefore, this choice is correct. And even if you remove the non essential information and try to read it without it, it would still make sense. So, Eli Eisenberg, a genetics expert at Tel Aviv University in Israel, recently discovered that cephalopods have a special genetic ability called RNA editing that confers evolutionary advantages. Did you see? It naturally flowed. That's why choice D is correct. By the way, if you're finding these punctuation rules tricky and you're finding the rules in this video helpful, I just put together a full SAT Standard English Conventions program. Inside, I break down every single grammar and punctuation rule that shows up on the SAT, and I've solved over 150 practice questions step by step so you can see exactly how to apply them on test day. And the best part, the whole program takes only 5 to 6 hours to finish, and that small investment of time can boost your score by 50 to 100 plus points. And it could be the reason why you get the score you need to get accepted into your dream school. If you're willing to work hard for a few hours to get a guaranteed improvement on the SAT writing section, click the link in the description. Next up, we will talk about colons. There's three criteria that must be met for us to use the choice with the colon. The first one is that the line before the blank must be independent. The second one is the first thing after the colon must be a pronoun, noun, or a noun phrase. And the last thing is the line after the colon must explain or give an example on the line before the blank. Let me show you what I mean with this first example. So in this question, I can see that there's a colon in the choices. So the first thing I'll do is I'll try to see if the three criteria or rules apply here. The first one is for the line before the blank to be independent. So let's read it. Butterfly is a 1988 painting by the Japanese artist A.O. Like many of A.O.'s paintings, Butterfly, which portrays a swimmer performing the butterfly stroke, attempts to make use of the entire visual light spectrum. Yeah, this line is independent. It makes sense on its own. Next up, is the first word after the colon a pronoun, noun, or a noun phrase? Okay, so after the colon, it says sporting rainbow striped goggles, which is a noun phrase. A noun phrase is a group of words that functions as a noun in the sentence. For example, garden is a noun, but if I say the big and beautiful garden, that is a noun phrase. And here it is saying sporting rainbow striped goggles, which means that the goggles are sporty and have rainbow stripes. So, yes, answering our question, this is a noun phrase. What about the last rule? Is the line after the colon explaining or giving an example in the line before the colon? So, the line before the colon says that it is attempting to make use of the entire visual light spectrum. And the line after the colon says, sporting rainbow striped goggles, the rainbow hued swimmer splashes through a wavy rainbow of water. So it keeps on saying how everything looks like a rainbow, and before the colon, it was saying it was attempting to make use of the entire visual light spectrum, which means that it was making use of all of the visual light spectrum or all of its colors, just like a rainbow. So, yes, the line after the blank was explaining how it was making use of the entire visual light spectrum. So, since all the three rules are met, then we will pick the choice with the colon. Okay, what about this next question? Try to solve it on your own. Okay, so rule one, the line before the blank must be independent. It says the number of jams available for tasting varied. Okay, yeah, that made sense on its own, so it's independent. Rule number two, the first thing after the colon must be a pronoun, noun, or a noun phrase. The first thing after the colon is some shoppers, which again is a noun phrase. So rule two applies to this question. What about rule three? The line after the colon must explain or give an example in the line before the colon. Okay, the line before the blank says the number of jams available for tasting varied, and the line after the blank says some shoppers have 24 different options, others only 6. Okay, so the line after the blank is explaining how the number of jams available for tasting varied, meaning that the line after the colon is explaining the line before the blank in more detail. So rule 3 works. Therefore, we will choose the choice with the colon. Okay, what about this next question? Try to solve it on your own. Okay, is this line before the blank independent? Okay, let's read it. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. Yeah, it made sense on its own, so it is independent. Is the first thing after the colon a pronoun, noun, or a noun phrase? It says in the northern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere is a phrase, not a noun phrase, but still a phrase. Therefore, this also kind of works. What about rule 3? The line after the colon must explain or give an example in the line before the blank. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. Then after the blank it says, in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. Okay, so in the line before the blank, it says what they had determined, and in the line after the blank, it explains what they determined. So yes, rule number 3 is also true for this question. Therefore, we will pick the choice with the colon. By the way, I've noticed a pattern with these colon questions. If you see in one of the choices there's a colon and in another there is the word while, then you can instantly pick the choice with the colon. For example, in choice A, there's a colon, and in choice C, there is the word while. And the correct answer is choice A with a colon. Same with the previous questions. Choice A has a colon while choice C and choice D both have the word while. And it turns out that choice A is correct. And the question even before that, choice B uses a colon while choice C and choice D both use the word while. And the correct answer is the one with the colon, so choice B. Okay, what about this next question? There's a colon and the word while. However, the word while is attached to the colon and it is not in another choice like with the previous one. So the rule does not apply to this one. Anyways, let's try to solve it. So I see a colon in the choices, meaning we will test the 3 rules. The line before the blank has to be independent. It says, for instance, the colorful calico rockfish can survive for a little over a decade. Even though there is a subject and a verb here, this line does not make sense on its own because it says for instance. It feels incomplete. It feels like there's something that should come before or after it connected to it. So rule 1 does not apply here. We can stop here and know that we will not pick the choice with the colon. However, let's just try the other rules as well. Rule 2 says the first thing after the colon must be a pronoun or a noun phrase. The first thing after the colon is while. Okay, so it says while in the beginning, which is not really a pronoun, a noun, or a noun phrase. But after it comes the rough-eye rockfish. However, it is still not enough to prove that the correct choice is the one with the colon. Rule 3. Rule 3 says the line after the colon must explain or give an example on the line before the blank. Okay, so let's read the text. For instance, the colorful calico rockfish can survive for a little over a decade. Then the line after the blank says, while the rough-eye rockfish boasts a maximum lifespan of about 2 centuries. So the line after the blank is not explaining or giving an example on the line before the blank. It is just adding to it. Now that we know that choice A is wrong, what about the other choices? So we know the question is in the independent dependent format, meaning that we cannot pick the choice with the period or the choice with the semicolon. However, we can pick the choice with the comma, therefore choice D is correct. This is the last and final question on colons. Pause the video and try to solve it on your own. I can see that there's a colon in the choices, so let's see if the three rules apply. Rule number one, the line before the blank must be independent. Okay, so let's read it. The vessel took 6 days to dislodge, in part due to its sheer size. Yes, that makes sense on its own, and it has a subject and a verb, so it is independent. Rule number two, the first thing after the colon must be a pronoun, noun, or a noun phrase. Okay, the first thing after the colon is the word it is. The word it is a pronoun. Pronouns are like it, she, he, they, we, and so on. So since it is a pronoun, then rule number two will work. What about rule number three? The line after the colon must explain or give an example on the line before the blank. The vessel took 6 days to dislodge, in part due to its sheer size. Then the part after the blank says, it is as heavy as 2,000 blue whales when fully loaded. Yeah, the line after the blank explains the sheer size by saying how heavy it is. Therefore, we can pick the choice with the colon, which is choice B. Now that we are finally done with colons, let's talk about defining noun sentences. Some of you might know these as modifiers. The reason I call these questions defining noun sentences, however, is because there's a description, then a comma, then immediately comes the thing that is being described, which is a noun or a noun phrase. Okay, so let's see a question. While one requires oxygen and one does not, okay, this is a description. Aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, so this is the thing being described. Whenever there's a description and immediately after that comes the thing being described, we will use a comma in between them. Thus, choice D is correct. What about this next question? It says, researcher Lin Ji developed a process for increasing the tensile strength, measured in gigapascals or GPa, of silkworm silk. Okay, was this independent? Yeah, it made sense on its own. What about the line after that? By dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metal ions, zinc and sugar, G increased the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately 0.5 GPa to 2 GPa. Okay, that also makes sense on its own and it's also independent. So we have three options to choose from. Period, semicolon, or comma plus fanboys. In this case, we have a period, so we'll choose that. So why did I put this in the defining noun sentence question part? Well, I've seen many students read the text like this. Researcher Lin Ji developed a process for increasing the tensile strength, measured in gigapascals or GPa, of silkworm silk by dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metal ions, zinc and sugar. Ji increased the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately 0.5 GPa to 2 GPa. So they connect the two lines and they would pick the wrong choice. Defining noun sentences are the reason for why students mistakenly connect the two lines. So here after the blank it says, by dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metal ions, zinc and sugar, G increased the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately 0.5 GPa to 2 GPa. Okay, so that part is a description of what the person had done, then the comma, then the name of the person that did the thing in the description, meaning that this is a defining noun sentence. And defining noun sentences are independent. So before that sentence started, there should have been a period, semicolon, or a comma plus fanboys. So whenever you feel like you can just read the entire text and feel like the two lines are dependent on one another, then check if there's a defining noun sentence immediately after the blank. Or you can just follow the first rule, which was to pause and check if the line before the blank makes sense, and then move on to the next line to see if that makes sense on its own as well. If you often get tricked by sentences like these, I suggest you watch my video on mastering independent and dependent sentences. Now let's move on to the simplest topic, question marks. Take a look at this question here. It says, the algaita is a double reed wind instrument from West Africa. The reed of a wind instrument is the mouthpiece. Okay, so we can see that this is giving us a statement. So if we say, where is sound made, that wouldn't really make sense because that would mean we would be asking a question. So we can cancel choice B and D out. And also, choice A uses a question mark. So we'll cancel that out as well because this is a statement, not a question, meaning the correct answer is choice C. Here's another question. Researchers Amit Kumar and Nicholas Ipley investigated how. Okay, so again, they're giving us a statement. They're telling us what they had done. They're not asking us a question. So we can cancel choice B and C out because they're using question marks. If you follow choice A, it would say researchers Amit Kumar and Nicholas Epley investigated how do people perceive acts of kindness. Okay, so like as you saw, it was pretty weird. Okay, so we need to cancel that choice out as well because it does not logically complete the text. It is going against the text because it sounds more like a question rather than a statement. Therefore, choice D is correct. Last question. Emperor penguins don't waddle out of the ocean. They launch themselves at such a high speed that they travel up to 2 meters before landing. How? Blank. Okay, so the sentence had come to an end and then it said how, meaning that it was going to ask a question. So let's look for the choice with the question mark, which is choice D, and it is obviously correct. So again, if you want, you can join this short and effective program to boost your SAT writing skills, or you can watch this next video where I show you how to master independent and dependent questions.